Good morning, lovelies! If you are a newbie writer or even a veteran writer, you may have noticed that the internet is saturated with writing advice. Articles, podcasts, webinars, online classes, YouTube videos, and they're all full of writing advice, some of it from actual writers, and quite a bit of it useful. But not all writing advice is created equal. Some is even downright harmful. So today I thought that I would share 10 of the worst pieces of writing advice that I have ever heard or seen circulated around the internet. Now I'm going to preface this video by saying that different advice works for different people. Most of the issues stem from the idea that every single writer has to do this one thing this way, and that's just not true. We're all built differently. We all create differently. I can only share with you my experience and expertise, which might not work for you. If we were all created the same, life would be boring. Unless we were all created like me, in which case life would be chaotic, confusing, weird, and nothing would ever get done. So with that in mind, let's get on to the terrible writing advice. Number 1, you must write every day, or you're not a real writer. Fuck that. Some of us work 10-hour food shifts in the food service industry. Other people have kids, each of which is a ball of constant chaos. Or they have mental health issues going on. Or they have a full-time job. Or they have weird access to Wi-Fi or whatever. This bit of advice that you have to write every single day stems from the idea that you need to consistently write, which is actually true. You need to be consistent in order to actually finish the novel. But that consistency does not necessarily translate to writing every single day. If you can write every day, even if it is only half a page, then yeah, go for it. The book will get done faster that way, at least. But if all you can manage is every Saturday afternoon, maybe with a little extra time on Sunday, that's fine. I personally work on my own manuscripts about 4 or 5 days of the week, which is a massive improvement over what my writing schedule was like in college when I only had time to write maybe 2 or 3 days a week. Less if it was finals. During the pandemic lockdown, that I wrote every day during that. I was unemployed, so there wasn't exactly much else to do, except for days after I would finish a rough draft. That I took those days off. Number 2, the best time for anyone to write ever is always in the morning. So get up at 5 a.m. if you have to. Look, I am a night owl, borderline insomniac. I do not write in the morning. I can barely function in the morning, unless we're counting the hours immediately after midnight. Look, a lot of people are at their most creative in the morning, which is where this idea stems from. And also, I don't know where it is internationally, but in America at least, there's this idea that, you have to get a lot done in the morning, that you have to get up early in the morning in order to be productive, to prove that you're not lazy. And so if you're gonna do some extra labor like writing, you should do it in the morning. But if you sleep in the morning and stay up super late to do that, that translates as being lazy, even though you're doing the exact same work in the exact same amount of time. I don't know, it's weird. Look, if you find yourself consistently creative in the mornings, that is when you get that itch. Right in the mornings. But other people are more creative late at night, or in mid-afternoon, or at 11:46 a.m. for precisely 87 minutes. Personally, I tend to be at my most creative in the mid-afternoon to late at night, which is when I do most of my manuscript writing or YouTube script writing. This script for this video was scripted at around 9-10 o'clock p.m. Number 3, you don't need to write down your ideas. If it's a good idea, you'll remember it. You will not remember it. You'll think that you'll remember it. You might even be absolutely obsessed with this idea for minutes, hours, days, even weeks. But if you do not write that shit down, either in a notebook or in your laptop somewhere, you will eventually forget it. Always carry a way to write down your ideas, be it a notebook or your phone or your laptop, whatever. It will save yourself an ocean of tears. Number 4, you must have a sympathetic villain. Anything else will make your story childish. I don't understand this obsession with sympathetic villains. I mean, maybe it's because we're living in the information age and like the internet allows us to see multiple points of view from groups and people and countries that we couldn't before. And that's given our generation a more nuanced view of morality and nationality and all these, I don't know. That seems like it'd be kind of a cool anthropology/history paper. Now, some stories do require a sympathetic villain. Others don't necessarily require it, but a sympathetic villain does work. And other stories really should not have a sympathetic villain at all. Those are the stories that require their villain to be the absolute scum of the earth. And that's fine. Those people exist. A sympathetic villain in that type of story would distract from that, alright? It would muddy up the story. It could even pull us away from the story because we're not rooting for the hero. Good writing is any writing that works, be it very simple or very complex and nuanced. A lot of writers are afraid that a traditionally pure evil villain would make their story too simplistic or childish. But there is a lot of pure evil out there in the world, and depending on what parts you pull from it, your story will never be considered childish or child-friendly. And hey, there's nothing wrong with a simple story. Some of the best stories in the world are just really simple, like A, B, and C happened. You want to know why there are all those think pieces floating around on YouTube about how the latest type of Disney villains just don't really work, they don't hit right, and how people are still super obsessed with those classic pure evil Disney villains? It's because we miss them. The sympathetic villain has taken over Hollywood and our bookshelves, and it's not necessarily for the better. We want to see more Maleficents and Scars and Cruellas and, not those shitty movies. But we miss those classic types of villains, so write them. On a related note, number 5, your hero must be morally gray. Heroism is dead. No, it's not. And part of why I know this is because all of those wholesome memes, videos, and articles keep popping up on my social media feeds. We want to see cute, unselfish heroism out there, both in the real world and in stories. Now look, the morally gray hero often goes hand in hand with the sympathetic villain, and it makes sense. For stories that, say, dissect the frailty of humanity, or talk about how subjective morality is, or the lengths that desperate people will go in times of war or natural disaster or poverty or whatever, then yeah, morally gray heroes, morally gray villains, sympathetic villains, like all of those types of characters make sense in those types of stories. But it's not absolute. I'm not being naive or overly optimistic or childish about this. Good and evil do exist in every human being. Look, humans are complicated. Get 100 of us in a room together and you'll get 100 different definitions of what is moral, what is right, and what is wrong. And you'll also get 100 different variations on how well we actually stick with our own personal morality. But stories don't have to be a perfect mirror of real life. Hell, half the reason that we read these stories is to escape from real life. When we look at figures like Captain America or Aragorn, we're not seeing who we are, we're seeing who we should aspire to be, someone to look up to. And for those types of stories, that works. They're role models, not mirror images. The mirror images would be US Agent or Boromir. And for some stories, having those types of characters in the main character role works. Meanwhile, you have creators like Quentin Tarantino who write completely bonker characters that are just really exaggerated and weird and kind of quirky. They're neither role models nor perfect mirrors, but they're still fascinating. It all depends on the type of story you want to tell. A quick commercial break before we continue. I have updated the merch on my Patreon page. In addition to sneak peeks of my own works and discounts on professional manuscript critiques, patrons of certain tiers get this Good Morning Lovely sticker, and higher tiered patrons get the Good Morning Lovelies mug. My Patreon link is in the description of this video, so go check that out if you want these goodies. Number 6, are you stuck? Kill a character. That'll improve the story. Not necessarily. Killing characters is really hard to do, convincingly. I mean, first of all, you have to find that balance between no emotional impact and melodrama that goes on forever. You have to create a situation that your audience would agree, okay, yeah, that would kill this character, rather than making it look contrived. And you need to be extra careful when you're killing off a minority character, otherwise you will be called out for killing the gays, or fridging, or black guy dies first, or any number of other harmful tropes. Killing a character for shock value really only works the first time you do it, and it doesn't have much reread value. You don't necessarily have to telegraph the death from a mile away. It can be sudden, even surprising, but it should still at least make sense in hindsight. Like when we're rereading everything that leads up to it, we should be able to say, yep, I can see how this would get someone killed. Robb Stark is the pinnacle example of this. And sometimes it doesn't even work for the advice. Sometimes killing that character leads to more dead ends, because you can't do anything with a dead character unless you're writing something like Supernatural, in which case the tension of a character death is already long gone. You need to find a different way to threaten your characters. I realized this when I was writing Citadel, my science fiction novel, which comes out next year. In addition to, killing off a variety of antagonists and villains, I had planned on killing off 4 protagonists. But while I was reading the manuscript from the villain's point of view, which is a trick that I would recommend you guys do as well, it's really handy, I realized that he would not kill one of these protagonists because they're so much more useful to him as a hostage. So instead of killing them, he just injured and imprisoned them. Keeping that character alive as a hostage made the climax more tense. It put the heroes in a tighter spot because they couldn't move as freely as they wanted to, and it allows me to use that character in the sequel. That opens up several potential plot lines that would not have existed if I had killed them off. I'll repeat, you cannot do anything with the dead characters. You gotta be really careful about killing them off. Number 7, chain yourself to your laptop until you've cranked out at least 3,000 words. Do not leave the room ever. Look, discipline is important, but holding yourself hostage is not going to do anyone any favors. Now listen, I do not have ADHD or anything that would make it particularly difficult to just sit down and write, but I still have to get up and take breaks every now and then. Probably more than I should, honestly. Especially if I have all day and I want to spend most of that time writing. I'm not going to spend the entirety of the day behind the desk. I need to move. I go on long walks, or I do the dishes that I have been postponing, or I run errands. This is why I do not have an office job. I tried, failed, and brought home only a couple of paychecks. It was telemarketing. Worst job I've ever had. The point is, do what works best for you. If you have to tie yourself to your laptop until you hit your word goal, fine. If you have to turn off all social media, also fine. But honestly, you might just need to start forming the habit of writing, which takes time to establish. But once you have established it, it's going to feel really weird not to write, and it's going to come easier to get those words on the page. Number 8, don't ever get your manuscript beta read or critiqued. They could steal your novel. I have literally never heard of this happening. And if I'm wrong, and they do, it is so easy to make a copyright claim in court. You don't even have to do anything. All the words that you write are legally yours. Just pull up the date of the revisions in Microsoft Word or Google Drive or, whatever it is that you're using. If it's anything like mine, you're gonna be able to go back months, if not years. Some people go out a step further. They print out their manuscript, they put it in an envelope, and then they mail it to themselves. It's dated and sealed, so it effectively works as a time capsule for, any police officer or lawyer that you need to show it to. So showing your manuscript to beta readers and critique partners has a fraction of a risk and all of the reward, because you need multiple eyes on your manuscript. You are going to miss stuff, and not just grammar and spelling. You're going to miss plot holes the size of volcanoes. You're going to make descriptions that make no sense. There are going to be character arcs that peter out halfway through. There are writers and readers groups out there. Use them. You will thank yourself later. Number 9, revisions are for grammar and spelling. You're not going to have to rewrite the whole novel. After all, Stephen King says that he only has to do some minor revisions. I have bad news for you. You're not Stephen King. I always hate those books, movies, or shows that center around an author and they finish their first draft and the story treats it like that's it. They're done. They just have to give it to an editor now, and then they're raking in the cash. That is so not how it works on multiple levels, but we'll focus on this one. Revisions take up anywhere from half to 3/4 of the writing process. It depends on how much time you need to do for prep and research. And a lot of times those revisions do require wholesale rewrites, anywhere from half to the entirety of the novel. You'll realize that the point of view is wrong and you need to pick a different narrator, or the main character needs a different arc, or the world building doesn't make sense and it requires a tune-up and that completely alters the plot. Chances are you are going to have to do at least 2 major revisions. Probably more. And that's not even including the rereads to catch all of the smaller stuff like sentence structure and word choice. And then yes, grammar and spelling. And then if you do get a literary agent and or editor, they're gonna make you do even more revisions. And on it goes. And number 10, never use swearing, adverbs, or said. If you do, you fail as a writer. Fuck that, she said slowly. Overuse of swears, adverbs, and said can tire out your readers, yeah. Maybe don't make more than 1/3 of all dialogue verbs said in your novel. And try to limit the amount of adverbs, no more than once a page, or once a chapter if you're really adhering to Stephen King. And if you're writing a kid's book, don't go more offensive than darn. But your job as a writer is not to find the fanciest word. Your job is to find the right word. And sometimes the right word is asshole. What is the worst piece of writing advice you have ever heard? Please tell me in the comments. And if you want writing advice that is not the worst, possibly even beneficial, I do have an entire playlist of writing advice right here for you to check out. I will see you next time. Bye, lovelies.